All right, let's talk about something that I know can sound incredibly dry, enterprise risk management. But seriously, stick with me on this, because this is not about boring spreadsheets. It's a story about how seeing the connections that nobody else does can be the difference between a company's total collapse and its biggest success. I want you to picture your business as this really intricate line of dominoes. Every single department, every project, every decision you make, it's one of those dominoes. Now, what happens if one of them, one that's hidden deep in their line, just starts to wobble? What if you never even saw it coming? This exact scenario, this fear, is what forced a complete rethinking of how we look at risk. So, to really understand where we're going with this, we've got to look back at where we've been. See, before the 21st century, the way companies handled risk was, well, it was dangerously fragmented. And it was setting the stage for some of the biggest corporate collapses we've ever seen. They called it silo risk management. You had the finance team over here, totally focused on financial risks. You had the IT team over there, worried about tech risks, and operations was just dealing with its own thing. The huge, glaring problem? Nobody was connecting the dots. Each department was just staring at its own little domino, completely oblivious to the fact that it was connected to, well, everything else. And look, this wasn't just some theoretical problem. As this quote from our source material points out, this whole isolated approach created a very real domino effect. A tiny failure in one department could trigger a massive chain reaction across the entire organization, leading to catastrophic failures, especially in huge industries like banking and insurance. So, to kind of sum it up, the old way was all about this isolated, departmental view. It only focused on individual risks. And the outcome? It was a minefield of missed connections and hidden dangers. It was so obvious that a new approach was desperately needed. And that new approach was enterprise risk management, or ERM for short. This was a complete fundamental shift from just looking at individual trees to finally seeing the entire forest. ERM is what we call a holistic framework. It starts at the very top, we're talking the board level, and it cascades all the way down through the entire organization. And get this, it's not just about preventing bad things from happening. It's about understanding the full spectrum of both risks and opportunities so you can make smarter, much more informed decisions. You know, ERM didn't just appear overnight. It evolved. After all those failures of the silo era, new regulations started pushing for a more integrated view. But the real catalyst, the thing that changed everything, was the 2008 global financial crisis. That event just brutally exposed the dangers of all these interconnected, unseen risks, and, you better believe, it massively accelerated the adoption of ERM. But here's the thing. For years, the biggest challenge for risk officers was proving ERM's worth. I mean, it felt right, it seemed logical, but could they actually prove it with cold, hard numbers? Well, let's take a look at the data. Academics dove headfirst into this exact question. They analyzed company performance over years and years to see if putting an ERM framework in place made a real, tangible financial difference. And their findings? Well, they weren't just a yes, they were a resounding yes. So, for example, a study by Hoyt and Liebenberg looked at U.S. insurers. And what they found was that those with mature, well-run ERM programs saw their firm's value increase by up to 20%. I mean, think about that. That's not a small number. That is a massive premium directly linked to better risk management. And it wasn't a fluke either. A totally different study, this time looking at European insurance companies, found that implementing ERM improved firm value by 6.5%. So you've got a different market, a different context, but the exact same positive impact. And this chart, it really tells the story, doesn't it? Whether you're looking at a 20% boost in the US market or a 6.5% lift in Europe, all the data points in the exact same direction. A holistic, big picture approach to risk literally makes a company more valuable. But ERM doesn't just add value, it also saves money. Another study found that adopting ERM actually reduced the marginal cost of risk by 14%. What that means is it becomes cheaper for the company to manage its risks, and that frees up capital for things like growth and innovation. Okay, so we've established that ERM works. But what makes it work exceptionally well? What takes it to the next level? Well, the secret ingredient, as it turns out, is something called corporate governance. You see, you can have the best ERM framework in the world, but if the leadership structure around it is weak, it's just never going to reach its full potential. Strong governance, which is basically how a company is directed and controlled, acts like a supercharger for ERM's effectiveness. So what does that actually look like? Well, research on Thai insurers found a few key things. A larger board, that brings more diverse expertise to the table. You get specialists from finance, tech, and operations all spotting risks from totally different angles. An independent board, with outside directors who are free from internal politics, is way better at asking the tough questions and challenging risky assumptions. And more frequent meetings? Simple. That just means more oversight, a tighter grip on what's really happening, allowing leadership to course correct before a small problem becomes a really big one. So when you put all of this together, the holistic view, the quantifiable value, and that governance supercharger, what you get is a complete and total change in how a company thinks about its future. This slide right here really captures that whole transformation. The old way was just defensive, focused only on preventing the downside, and honestly, it was often just to keep regulators happy. The ERM way, it's proactive, it's strategic, it's actually looking for upside opportunities, and is motivated by a genuine desire to create real value for shareholders.
And that right there, that's the ultimate takeaway. Enterprise risk management isn't just some defensive chore you have to do to avoid disaster. No, it's a strategic tool for building a smarter, more resilient, and ultimately a more valuable organization by seeing the entire board, not just one single domino.
So the final question is a pretty simple one. In a world that's just full of interconnected risks and opportunities, are you spending all your time just watching for individual dominoes to fall? Or are you focused on building a stronger foundation for the entire structure? Because in the end, one of those builds a business that survives, and the other builds one that thrives.